Kale trudged through the wreckage of what had once been a thriving warship, his boots leaving smudges in the thin layer of ionized dust that coated every surface. Smoke curled lazily from the shattered panels, and the hum of failing power grids made the place feel like a dying beast. He had seen worse, of course. Entire fleets had burned beneath him. But something about this battlefield made his throat tight with the familiar mix of exhaustion and relief. He was supposed to feel victorious, but all he felt was the heavy press of another day survived. The council had summoned him, and he could almost hear their dry, bureaucratic voices droning over whatever ceremonial speech they had prepared for the hero of Sector 903, as though his victories were nothing more than a tedious tick mark in their ledger. Instead of a grand hall adorned with banners and trophies, Kale found himself led into a room that looked suspiciously like a waiting area, except the furniture floated 3 inches off the ground and occasionally rotated on its own. He squinted at the humanoid figures seated with perfect poise. They wore garments that shimmered and shifted color depending on the angle of the light, or perhaps depending on the mood of the wearer. Kale wasn't sure. One of them gestured at him with a hand that seemed to fracture the air around it like it had been drawn from liquid crystal. "Kale of Terra," the voice intoned, "you have served with distinction. The Alliance offers you a gift." Kale stiffened. A gift. The last time someone offered him a gift, after a campaign, it had been a medkit laced with experimental stimulants that left him jittering for 3 days straight. He was hoping, at the very least, for a new plasma blade, or maybe a holographic star map with roots that didn't explode when you blinked. Instead, they produced a container that shimmered with a pale golden light, and with a polite flourish, they opened it. Inside stood a woman, or at least what Kale assumed was a woman. Her skin was flawless, her hair a cascade of silver that caught the light in strange, liquid-like ways, but it was her ears that made him stumble backward just slightly. They were long and elegant, curving upward like delicate fins, twitching occasionally as though listening to some private melody. Her eyes were sharp, colored like molten amber, and they flicked to him with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "Ah," Kale said, trying to sound composed, which came out more like a croak. "A gift." He had been expecting a weapon, not this. He had faced star dragons and plasma storms, but no manual had prepared him for this. The woman's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. "I am Lyra," she said, voice smooth as tempered glass with a hint of laughter hidden in the edges. "And you are Kale, I assume." Yes, that's me," he replied, unsure whether he should bow, shake her hand, or offer a sarcastic comment about interstellar etiquette. "Nice to meet you." He waved a hand vaguely at her, as if she might be an illusion he could dismiss with a flick of his wrist. Lyra raised an eyebrow and her ears twitched again. "I have already read your dossier. I know everything about you, Kale, warrior of Terra." Kale blinked. "You wait, you read it, like Reg Reed, or like glanced over with a cup of tea kind of read?" "Both," she said with a small, mischievous grin. "Mostly the tea." Kale couldn't help but snort, a laugh that quickly caught in his throat when he remembered the gravity of the moment. He had survived countless battles, but this was new. He tried to imagine what he was supposed to do now. Escort her. Guard her, train with her. And just when he was formulating an entirely inappropriate joke about tea and interstellar espionage, she stepped closer. "Do not misunderstand me, Kale," she said, voice suddenly firm but still tinged with amusement. "I am not here to be your companion, your prize, or your distraction. I am here to accompany you, temporarily, until the council decides the full scope of your reward." Kale's mind reeled. Reward. He looked around the room, half expecting someone to mutter, "Just kidding, he gets a packet of dehydrated protein." "Lyra, you are the reward." She laughed softly, the sound like wind over crystal spires. "For now. But the details are complicated. Think of me as a guide, a companion, and occasionally a critic. And yes, I may make fun of your taste in starship paint." Kale muttered something about being proud of his war-scorched black hull, and Lyra immediately launched into a playful critique of his aesthetic choices, including a particularly savage commentary on the dust patterns from the last meteor storm. Despite himself, Cale chuckled, the tension in his shoulders loosening. Somehow, despite the strangeness, the humor, and the outright absurdity of it all, he felt the first flicker of ease in weeks. As they prepared to depart for the council chambers, Cale noticed small things he hadn't at first. The way Lyra's eyes scanned the room, noting exits, communication nodes, and potential threats with lightning speed. The way her ears twitched ever so slightly when someone approached or moved too quickly. He realized with a jolt that she wasn't merely a human-like figure with odd ears. She was aware, always aware, and not just of him, but of everything around her. The ship ride to the council chambers was a comedy of errors. Cale struggled with controls designed for two-pilot operation, while Lyra calmly pointed out every mistake, occasionally laughing at his panicked attempts to correct zero-gravity flips and inadvertent spin maneuvers. At one point, Cale collided with a storage locker, sending a cluster of floating nutrient pods spinning like moons around them. Lyra reached out a hand, her ears twitching in what Cale was fairly certain was delight at his clumsiness, and stabilized the pods with a flick of her fingers that made the pods snap back into place, as if gravity had obeyed her whims alone. "Perhaps," she said dryly, "we should practice human pilot training before venturing further." Cale groaned, rubbing his forehead, but there was a spark of excitement beneath the embarrassment. Despite everything, the unexpected gift, the odd ears, the mysterious aura, he felt the thrill of adventure stir again. This was a battlefield unlike any he had faced, and Lyra, with her wit and uncanny awareness, was both the enemy and the ally he didn't yet know he needed. As the council chambers loomed ahead, he realized that this reward might just change everything. And perhaps, just perhaps, he wouldn't completely embarrass himself in front of a galactic queen disguised as a companion, if he was very, very careful. The ship hummed beneath Cale's hands, a living pulse of energy and circuits that seemed to sigh with every maneuver. He had spent the last hour trying to convince himself that Lyra's laughter at his pilot skills was a minor inconvenience, but every tilt of the vessel, every microgravity misstep, was punctuated by the soft, amused chimes of her voice. "You know," she said, perched lightly on the edge of the navigation console, her long ears flicking like delicate antennae, "if we were under attack right now, you'd have already accidentally flung us into the nearest star." Cale groaned. "I'm just warming up. This zero-gravity thing is tricky, and your smug commentary isn't helping." Lyra leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "I wouldn't call it commentary. I prefer constructive observation with occasional humor. Besides, you're improving, slowly, very slowly." Despite his frustration, Cale had to laugh. It was impossible not to when someone with such an impossible elegance could be so utterly merciless. Still, he was beginning to suspect there was more to Lyra than her teasing. A subtle authority hung around her like a second skin, one that could silence a room, or, as he had glimpsed back on the council station, reroute Starship defense drones with a mere thought. Their destination was a border sector known for its rebellious outposts, a place where laws were suggestions and smugglers acted as unofficial police. Lyra had insisted they travel together to ensure Cale received his full reward briefing, which he increasingly suspected was her way of making sure he didn't crash into a moon on the way. Midway through the trip, a warning light flashed. A pirate skiff, small but heavily armed, was approaching at high velocity. Cale yelped, fumbling with the controls. Lyra calmly extended her hand, her fingers flicking in patterns Cale couldn't decipher, and the ship shifted effortlessly, dodging plasma bolts as if the skiff was a fly swatted from the air. "You see," she said, ears twitching in amusement. "A professional might have panicked, but I simply rearranged the battlefield for optimal safety." "I'm a professional," Cale protested, though his voice lacked conviction as another volley of energy bolts passed harmlessly by. Lyra raised an eyebrow, eyes glinting. "You're learning slowly." The pirates, clearly unprepared for their prey to move with such precision, reeled and Kale managed to land the ship on the nearest asteroid platform. He was shaking from adrenaline, embarrassment, and a strange thrill at having survived without incident. Lyra stepped off the ship, her long ears twitching as she scanned the area. "You humans have interesting ways of celebrating survival," she said lightly. "Mostly screaming, panic, and occasionally spilling food." Kale stared. "You find that funny?" She shrugged, a playful glint in her molten gold eyes. "Yes. The physics of human panic are entertaining, but also fascinating." They entered the asteroid platform, where traders, smugglers, and mercenaries moved in a chaotic ballet. Kale felt out of place, his war-worn armor and blackened boots marking him as a relic from a far harsher conflict. Lyra guided him with ease, slipping between crowds, ears twitching like sensors picking up whispers and threats he couldn't see. She stopped occasionally to whisper instructions, correcting his posture, his gait, even the way he held his weapon so it didn't look clumsy to passers-by. Kale muttered something about etiquette being a poor substitute for combat experience. Her laughter followed him down the corridor. "Etiquette is survival too, Kale. Believe it or not, some battles are won without firing a single shot." By the time they reached the Council's satellite chamber, Kale had begun to see glimpses of her true nature. Small details, a subtle hum around her that seemed to bend communication signals, the way her eyes scanned not just people but the gravitational fluctuations, the invisible energy threads of the platform itself. He had glimpsed her command over the environment before but had dismissed it as exaggeration. Now he could not. Lyra allowed him a moment to absorb the complexity before speaking. "There are layers to power, Kale. Strength, strategy, diplomacy, and influence. You have mastered the first. The others, well, you are about to start learning." Kale swallowed hard. "You make it sound like a test." "It is," she admitted lightly, ears flicking in amusement. "But consider it an immersive tutorial. You're on probation." Kale groaned. "I get the feeling the galaxy didn't prepare me for this kind of war." She smiled, just faintly, and the edges of her eyes crinkled in a way that suggested she enjoyed his discomfort. "War is obvious. Chaos is manageable. Politics is far more entertaining and far more dangerous." As the council meeting began, Kale realized he had never been so out of place in his life. Every voice in the chamber carried authority, yet none commanded as effortlessly as Lyra's silent presence. She floated a hand briefly, redirecting a projection, and a murmur ran through the council. Kale blinked. She didn't even speak. She merely existed in that room, and it was as if the laws of gravity and decorum themselves bent to her will. During a break, Kale found himself beside her, attempting to process what had just occurred. "So, you're just going to sit there and own the room without even trying?" Lyra smirked, ears flicking like twin flags. "Observation is a form of ownership, Kale. You'll learn that soon enough." "And when do I get to not feel like an idiot?" he asked, half serious, half hoping it was a joke. "Eventually," she said, with a grin that could have been mistaken for patience. "But first, you'll survive the next asteroid skirmish, navigate the Council's labyrinthine customs, and perhaps refrain from accidentally insulting an entire alien species. Then we'll talk about idiocy." Kale groaned again, muttering something about preferring dragons and plasma storms. Lyra laughed, the sound musical and sharp, bouncing off the walls, and he realized that, no matter how absurd this situation was, he had never encountered anyone or anything like her. He might have been a warrior, but with Lyra at his side, he was learning that the battles ahead were less about firepower and more about perception, humor, and the strange, intricate games of interstellar influence. As they stepped back into the corridor, ready for the next council engagement, Kale noticed something extraordinary. For the first time in months, he felt alive not because of war, but because of the unpredictable chaos of being paired with a galactic enigma who teased, tested, and perhaps even understood him better than he understood himself. And the though terrifying, made him grin. The alarms had barely ceased their frantic wail when Kale realized the council chamber had transformed into a theater of organized chaos. Hollow projections of distant systems flickered in midair, some static, some alive with signals of unrest. Lyra moved among them like a conductor orchestrating a cosmic symphony, her long ears twitching in precise rhythm, fingers drawing invisible arcs that bent communication arrays and redirected defense drones with effortless grace. Kale stared, mouth open, feeling simultaneously useless and awed, and then she looked at him. Her amber eyes glimmered with amusement. "You've seen enough skirmishes, Kale," she said, voice smooth and teasing. "But a rebellion, this is different. Strategy is required, not brute force." He nodded, still dazed. "And somehow I'm supposed to help. How exactly? With my charm, my sense of fashion." Lyra snorted, the sound echoing lightly against the walls. "Your charm is negligible, but you may be mildly useful. Stay close, and try not to trip over interstellar diplomacy." The council's holograms lit up with alerts. An entire sector had declared independence from the Alliance, fueled by rumors and half-truths. Kale's initial instinct was to reach for his weapon, ready to fight, but Lyra's gentle tug on his arm stopped him. "Not yet, warrior. Sometimes the most effective attack is subtlety." Kale swallowed. He had never been subtle. He had crushed armies, stormed fortresses, and survived plasma storms, but subtlety felt like navigating a minefield in zero gravity. And yet, as Lyra guided him through the holographic controls, redirecting signals, calming agitated planetary governors, and intercepting misinformation with precision, Kale began to see the pattern. Her humor never left her. She teased him about everything from his clumsy hand gestures to his penchant for overreacting. But beneath it, she was teaching him, shaping his instincts into a different kind of skill. "See," she said as a rebellious communications node tried to bypass their channels, "sometimes you need to speak softly. Literally in this case." Kale raised an eyebrow, softly. Lyra grinned. "Yes, your voice carries. Persuasion can be more effective than plasma fire. Watch." She leaned toward the console, her fingers dancing across holographic projections. The node blinked, hesitated, and then aligned with their network. Kale blinked in disbelief. "You just bribed a satellite with charm." "Diplomacy, Kale. Charm optional," she corrected, ears flicking playfully. Hours passed like minutes. Kale, under Lyra's guidance, began to anticipate moves, predict disruptions, and even inject small interventions of his own. When a rogue fleet tried to blockade a neutral planet, Kale redirected supplies, relayed critical messages, and, most surprisingly, suggested a diversion strategy that actually worked. Lyra's laugh was pure delight, and Kale realized he had learned more about influence and responsibility in a single day than in all his years as a soldier. Finally, after a tense but humor-laced day, Lyra stopped and faced him. "Kale," she said, voice serious now, "there is something you must know. I am not merely a companion or a reward. I am the queen of this galaxy, the one who commands these systems and holds the authority to decide the fate of millions." Kale stared. His jaw opened, closed, and opened again. "You wait, you're the queen." Lyra nodded, her long ears twitching. "Yes, and you, warrior of Terra, have performed admirably not because of strength alone, but because you've learned to adapt. Humor, observation, patience, even mistakes, they all matter." Kale shook his head, disbelief mixing with awe. "So, all this time, the gift, the training, the teasing, it was preparation." "Exactly," she said, smirking. "Consider it a promotion to understanding." He laughed shakily at first, then more freely. "Promotion, huh? From killer to diplomatic apprentice." Lyra's grin widened. "Apprentice, yes, but perhaps someday partner. If you survive the politics, that is." Kale's gaze swept across the chamber, holographic projections of planets and fleets, stabilizing under their combined influence. The rebellion had been quelled, not with bloodshed, but with coordination, subtle maneuvering, and a few well-timed jokes. Kale realized he no longer felt the constant itch for combat, the restless need to strike first and ask questions later. He understood now that survival, true survival, was more than reflexes. It was patience, observation, humor, and adaptability. "Wait," he said, a mischievous glint entering his eyes. "Are you saying, all those times you made fun of me, that was training?" Lyra tilted her head, ears flicking with precision. "Yes, and admit it, you enjoyed it." Kale groaned but smiled. "I might have a little, don't tell anyone." "You're human," she said, laughing. "Secrecy is impossible." The council members watched silently, some in shock, some in admiration as Kale, once a blunt instrument of war, now stood beside Lyra, a warrior tempered by wisdom, humor, and respect. For the first time, Kale realized that the galaxy wasn't a battlefield to be conquered, but a living network of civilizations, each with its quirks, weaknesses, and potential. And for the first time he felt ready to navigate it, not with weapons alone, but with the unpredictable, powerful combination of laughter, intelligence, and understanding. Lyra extended her hand. "Shall we return, Kale? There are still planets to visit, laws to negotiate, and misbehaving bureaucrats to annoy." Kale took her hand, grinning. "Lead the way, Your Majesty, apprentice at your service." As they stepped from the chamber into the vast expanse of space, Kale felt a thrill unlike any he had known. Not the thrill of battle, but the thrill of responsibility, humor, and the astonishing weight of discovery. He had been given a gift, yes, but the greatest gift was understanding that strength alone was never enough, and that sometimes the universe rewarded those who could laugh, learn, and adapt. Lyra looked at him with that familiar spark of amusement. "Try not to break anything on the way," she teased. Kale smirked. "No promises." And for the first time, he didn't need to. With Lyra by his side, the galaxy didn't feel like a war zone. It felt like a place worth navigating, one clever, chaotic, and beautifully unpredictable step at a time.